Hand cannons are one of the new top contenders in PvE. I know that sounds like a joke, but the background footage of me absolutely melting Master Lost Sector champions and Hive Guardians at minus 27 power with one proves that they are actually the real deal. And the crazy thing is that those clips don't even showcase the maximum potential that this hand cannon build is capable of. So let's walk through it together piece by piece so you can fulfill your gunslinger fantasies. Wait, did that drag just drop a factor 75 engram? The no prep, no mess meal kits that save time and alleviate stress? I think he did. Factor is a pre-made meal kit service that delivers nutritious food fast, so you can avoid the time-consuming and costly nonsense of cooking, cleaning, and ordering in. It's perfect for gamers like you and me, as chef-quality meals ready in just 2 minutes with no prep or cleanup necessary. And thanks to the more than 27 meal options each week, there is always something for everyone. You can use my link or go to go.factor75.com and use code POGMACTICSAUG50 for 50% off your first box. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone. Thanks so much to Factor for keeping us satiated so we can focus completely on this one-shot hand cannon build. A different version of this build was actually already somewhat decent last season, but the newly added buffs have truly leveled up hand cannons to put them in a territory that one can genuinely call them meta. The buffs I'm talking about, of course, are the 15% reload speed bonuses to all hand cannons across the board, as well as their 20% damage increase to all red bar enemies, and a whopping 75% damage increase to all orange bar enemies. On their own, these buffs aren't mind-blowing, but when paired with the Lucky Pants Hunter exotic boots, things begin to get pretty spicy, like 5 peppers on an Asian food takeout menu spicy. At a base level, the Lucky Pants exotic boots permanently grant a pretty sizable stat package to all hand cannons, such as a bonus 100 handling to ready speed, an extra 0.6 times ready animation duration multiplier, and a 40% more accurate cone size for 4 seconds on readying. That's a lot of numbers and made up technical game terms that basically boil down to one thing. Hand cannons feel buttery smooth with this exotic equipped. But we're just getting started, because the main benefit of the Lucky Pants exotic boots is their exotic perk, illegally modded holster. With this perk, upon readying a fully loaded kinetic or subclass matching element hand cannon, you gain 60% increased hand cannon damage per hit for 5.5 seconds, maxing out after 10 hits at 600% bonus damage. After the buff timer runs out, or after you swap weapons, you lose all of your stacks and cannot gain stacks or reacquire the damage buff for 10 seconds, indicated by the out of luck debuff on screen. A secret fun little trick with these boots is that you don't even have to switch to another weapon entirely before readying the hand cannon to activate the perk either, because you can actually pull out your ghost while holding your hand cannon and then hit the shoot button to ready up the hand cannon, and subsequently the illegally modded holster perk as well. Do me a favor and consider hitting that subscribe button down below if you did not know that before watching this guide video. But all that being said, we are nowhere near done yet, because while a 600% damage buff is quite nice, it is nothing close to the maximum possible damage buff that we will be hitting with some of the other buffs in this video. But before we get to those, I first want to show you the 3 hand cannons that will be your trusty partners with this Lucky Pants build. The first of these hand cannons is the exotic 3-round burst kinetic hand cannon, Crimson, a 24 magazine, 415 round per minute monster that has some incredibly strong synergies with this build. First and foremost, its quick fire rate, thanks to its 3-round bursts, makes it the absolute fastest hand cannon in the entire game for stacking the Lucky Pants buff, hitting near max stacks with just 3 bursts in just about a second. Additionally, kills with the Crimson will heal you, allowing you to focus exclusively on being offensive and making the most out of your Lucky Pants damage buff. And if that wasn't enough, precision kills with the weapon will also refill the magazine, theoretically offering you infinite uptime on the weapon to be firing non-stop during the full 5.5 second buff period if aimed properly. This hand cannon and Lucky Pants were literally made for each other with how well they complement one another with their quickly stacking damage buffs and theoretical bottomless magazine. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other strong options, because the second hand cannon choice for this build in the Malfeasance certainly packs a punch and then some as well. Unlike the Crimson, Malfeasance doesn't have any method to reload itself on kills, but that hardly matters when you consider that the hand cannon has a 20 round magazine, the largest of any single shot exotic hand cannon in all of Destiny 2. Furthermore, the catalyst of this weapon equips it with the Vorpal Weapon perk, providing an extra 20% damage bonus to any orange bar, mini boss, champion, or boss tier enemy. The hand cannon's exotic perk also provides it with burrowing slugs as bullets that will stack onto enemy shot and explode once enough are stacked, about 4 or 5 of them. And the beauty of this exotic perk is that it has no range fall off either, giving a pretty sizable chunk of the hand cannon's damage literally infinite range, alleviating one of the biggest pain points typically associated with hand cannon usage. And while the explosion itself doesn't stack with the Lucky Pants damage buff, it deals precision damage whether the slugs were delivered to the body or to the head, meaning that even from far away where it's tough to hit crits, you'll still be able to chunk out enemies. The final hand cannon option, and the one that surprised me the most, is a Destiny 2 vanilla classic in Sunshot. On paper, this one doesn't sound quite as crazy as its two other competitors, coming with 2 exotic perks in Sunburn, which grants the weapon explosive rounds and highlights on targets that take damage from Sunshot, and Sunblast, which makes targets killed by Sunshot explode in solar energy, and that includes targets killed by the solar explosion from Sunblast as well, making a domino effect of chain Sunblast detonation not only possible, but actually quite likely. But that's not even what makes Sunshot such a strong pairing with this build, because that is actually thanks to 2 different aspects of the weapon. The first is the fact that it just has an incredibly strong base stat package that has it hitting like an absolute truck in all levels of content. And the second is the fact that unlike its 2 kinetic brothers, it is a solar hand cannon, which gives it the opportunity to be paired with some pretty insanely powerful and synergistic subclass fragments that we will talk about in just a moment. Because first, we need to talk about the class ability that pairs exceptionally well with this build and playstyle, Marksman's Dodge, which simply reloads your currently drawn weapon on class ability cast. This dodge feels really solid with this build, as you can either use it to instantly reload your hand cannon in the middle of your Lucky Pants damage buff to maximize damage potential, or immediately before swapping weapons to begin your illegally modded holster stacking for an incredibly seamless perk activation. And trust me when I say that we won't be needing Gambler's Dodge for melee ability refunds anyway when we get to the aspects and fragments in this build, which we can actually talk about right now. The first of these is On Your Mark, a 3 fragment slot aspect that grants a stacking weapon handling and reload speed increase buff on precision final blows, with an activation of your dodge immediately giving you the maximum 3 stacks. As we are going for the Gunslinger fast draws and Yeehaw's power fantasy with this build, buffs to these stats will ensure that our hand cannons are always firing. Aspect number 2, bringing on another 2 fragment slots to the party, is Knock 'em Down, which significantly increases the projectile count and damage of our Blade Barrage super, and more importantly, refunds our melee ability in full when getting final blows with it while in possession of the Solar Radiant buff. And this is especially crucial for this build when considering the first fragment that we'll be utilizing in the Ember of Torches, which of course grants the Radiant buff to yourself and all nearby allies when landing a hit with your powered melee ability. Meaning that when pairing this fragment together with the melee ability refunding portion of the Knock 'em Down aspect, we are blessed with a method to infinitely possess the 25% weapon damage increase radiant buff so long as we are able to land final blows with our melee ability. Speaking of which, in my personal opinion and experience, the absolute best melee ability for this build is the Knife Trick, which throws out 3 knives and deals a pretty solid chunk of damage. The next core fragment of this build is the Ember of Singeing, which grants us a 300% additional base class ability regeneration buff for 3 seconds when applying Scorch to enemies, which is incredibly convenient considering that our Knife Trick melee ability that makes us radiant and can be refunded perpetually also scorches enemies on impact, thus activating the Ember of Singeing. Another thing that scorching enemies with our Knife Trick melee will accomplish is the activation of our third core fragment, the Ember of Searing, which spawns a fire sprite when killing scorched enemies, which will grant a chunk of grenade energy upon scavenging. The Ember of Searing also grants melee ability energy when defeating scorched targets, but for obvious reasons, we won't be needing that too much. Now, while these 3 fragments should be used no matter what when running this build, the occupants of the final 2 slots will be determined both by what element of hand cannon you are using, as well as what type of content you are playing. In the event that you are using a solar hand cannon, such as the Sunshot, you'll want to slot in the Ember of Mercy to receive the restoration buff when scavenging those fire sprites created from the Ember of Searing, as well as the Ember of Empyrean to extend any currently active radiant and restoration buffs by 4 seconds for every solar kill. The result of the combination of these 2 fragments alongside Sunshot is a persistent healing and 25% weapon damage buff that will never go away so long as you continue to get kills, making you borderline invincible in even the most dangerous pieces of Destiny content. In the event that you decide to go with one of the previously mentioned kinetic hand cannon options, however, you'll want to occupy fragment slot 4 with the Ember of Solace to increase the duration of all restoration and radiant effects by 50%. As for slot number 5, in the event that you are running this build with a fire team in team activities, you'll want to slot in the Ember of Benevolence to receive a 400% bonus to base grenade, melee, and class ability regeneration anytime you bestow an ally with a solar buff, which will be quite often thanks to your radiant activations from the Ember of Torches and infinite melee abilities to proc it thanks to the knock 'em down aspect. In the event that you are a lone wolf running solo, however, you'll want to instead slot the Ember of Mercy into that 5th slot to once again grant the restoration buff on Fire Sprite pickup. And to avoid any confusion, I'll have 3 separate and clearly labeled build links for you down below, depending on which playstyles and setups you want to take home with you. But don't scroll down there to click those links and tag those like and subscribe buttons just yet, because we still have a whole bunch of mods to take our overall hand cannon damage buff even higher that you definitely don't want to leave without. In this department, things kick off on the gloves with a loader mod matching the element of your hand cannon for maximum hand cannon DPS uptime. In a similar vein, you'll also want to slot 3 copies of Weapon Surge matching the element of your hand cannon onto the boots for a 22% weapon damage bonus when armor charged. Speaking of which, make sure you stick around until the end to see what our total damage buff number is when we add up all of these bonuses. Before we get there though, we need to touch on our orb generation methods to become armor charged, such as a matching element weapon siphon mod on the helmet for orbs on weapon multi-kills, Reaper on the class item for orbs on weapon kills after class ability usage, and heavy-handed on the gloves for orbs on powered melee final blows. We can then slot powerful attraction on the class item to scavenge all of these orbs, thus receiving armor charge stacks whenever we activate our class ability. And with a copy of Dynamo on the helmet, that very class ability activation will also provide a chunk of super energy when used near enemies. Continuing to play into the gunslinger hand cannon buff theme, we'll also want time dilation on the class item to increase the duration of our armor charge stacks and therefore our DPS buffs. We can then finalize things with impact induction on the gloves for a chunk of grenade energy when dealing melee damage to supply us with healing or fusion grenades, dealer's choice by the way, as well as some resists on the chest and stat mods on all 5 pieces, going for resilience, mobility, and discipline in that order. And as usual, I've got Mobalytics written guide and Destiny item manager one-click loadout saving links down in the description below that you can use to easily reference or save this build at any time. And conveniently, those are both located in the description right next to those like and subscribe buttons as well, which I'd greatly appreciate your consideration and clicking if you're enjoying the video so far. So with everything put together, let's take stock of what this build is truly capable of. Looking at the stacking of the 600% hand cannon damage buff from Lucky Pants, the 25% damage buff from Radiant, and the 22% damage buff from Weapon Surge mods, we are looking at a 967% total possible damage buff against any enemy in all of Destiny 2.
That's a lot of damage.
But if you factor in the 20% red bar enemy damage bonus that hand cannons just received, that number climbs up to a total 1,192% damage buff. And if you consider the whopping 75% orange bar enemy damage bonus that hand cannons got, we max things out at a grand total 1,768% possible hand cannon damage buff. And if that isn't enough DPS to convince you to subscribe, then I don't know what is. I hope you enjoyed today's build video. I'll catch you in the live stream. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.